Hi, I'm Scott Parazynski. Please check out my interview with the Exploration Institute about my book, The Sky Below.
Hi everyone, this is Armin Ellis and I'm very excited to have Scott Parazynski with me today. Scott is a former astronaut and has just written his autobiography, The Sky Below. Scott, it's great to have you with me today.
Wonderful to be with you, Armin. Excited to spend the morning here.
Scott, what made you want to write your autobiography?
Quite honestly, Armin, I really didn't. It was one of those things that sort of started organically. I had written a few vignettes, wanted to basically capture some of the more exciting, dramatic moments of my life, and so I started to write, mini chapters, if you will. And then, with the encouragement of my family and friends, they said, "Gosh, I've done all these crazy, wonderful things. I think there's a book there. You really ought to put it together." And I said, "Well, okay, I'll do that," not knowing how difficult it really is.
So it took you a long time to write this throughout the process?
I expected 3 to 6 months. It ended up taking 3 years to actually get it to print. And perhaps that's because I'm a perfectionist, but also I really wanted it to be a very honest look at what it takes to drive success. And it's not easy, as you know. I mean, look at your wonderful career. The things that mean the most to us are the things that we have to work the hardest for and take the most investment of time and resources. And so I wanted to be very truthful. It's not just about achieving the pinnacles of success, but how do you manage the failures along the way? How do you keep going? Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to tell that story, and then also describe the human experience of what it's like to float outside of a hatch on a spacewalk, or to set your boot prints down on the summit of Mount Everest. What does it look like, feel like, smell like? What's going through your head at those momentous times in life, and so to do all that, at least for me, took quite a bit of time. I had to really buckle down and get my head back in the game to think through what those experiences really were like. And I was aided by an amazing collaborative writer, Susie Flory, who could have been a psychiatrist in another life. She's very probing with her questions, and so she wouldn't let me get away with anything. So I'd write a vignette. No. Let's go 5 layers deeper, and that process was really, very successful, I think.
I was actually struck by how much detail you go into your personal life in the book, which is quite fascinating, really, because it's the kind of thing that I think a lot of people are they never get to see in someone who's been to space and been to the top of Mount Everest and been to Antarctica and done all of these wonderful things. It's amazing that you open up in this way.
Thank you. No, I wanted to really, as we joke, lift the kimono and show the real stuff, rather than kind of this imaginary right stuff. What does it really take? And so I'm proud of the pathway that I've taken through life. I've had, like everyone, setbacks, and I've had to keep going. I've had some major medical challenges, as readers will see in the book, and even some family challenges that I've had to work through. But through it all, my family has done extremely well. I think the work that we've accomplished has been, significant, and so I'm proud of that body of work.
So let's start from the early days. You just had an adventurous childhood, growing up in all interesting parts of the world.
Yeah.
Do you think that had a massive impact on the way that you continue to see the world from those early days to today?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you can relate, but my own perspective is that life's greatest lessons come from outside the classroom. I don't say that very often in front of teachers, although I value greatly classroom education, but I think it's really important for people to get out there, to meet other people, to travel, open themselves up to new opportunities, and take risks. Measured risk is a good thing without fear of failure. Failure is going to be something that's part of everyone's life, and you just have to be able to pick yourself back up and go. And so through my adventurous parents, we lived in West Africa, in the Middle East, and in Europe during my formative grade school years. And I had traveled the world extensively by the time I made university. And it gave me this great global perspective and also a certain wanderlust, I think.
Mm-hmm. One of the stories that I really enjoyed in this is that you learned to scuba dive without any real training.
Well, I learned from a couple of French kids in West Africa, and they said to me in French, which I spoke reasonably well at the time, go down and come back up when you run out of air. That was the extent of my education as a scuba diver. I was a strong swimmer and a snorkeler at that point, and a free diver, but I had never done anything like this before in my life. But I always wanted to try scuba diving. Luckily, I survived. It's horrible advice to go down with a pair of twin 80s on your back, a lot of air, and the potential to get bent or run out of air or what have you. But it set the bit in my life. I've been a passionate scuba diver ever since.
It kind of struck me, actually, reading this part, that you've done a lot of things where you had to rely on equipment working properly. So you must have a very interesting perspective on equipment. How do you think about things that some engineer designed somewhere and your life now depends on that piece of equipment functioning?
Oh, that's a great question. And as a kid, I grew up working alongside my dad, doing carpentry projects around the house, building things, repairing things. And so, I've a mechanical aptitude. And I like to understand how things work, how they might break, and how I might be able to fix them. And that, if you think about it, is really the ideal toolkit for a spacewalker, because that's what a spacewalker does outside. So I think from those early days, even as a scuba diver, trying to understand the rudiments of the self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, all the way up to a spacesuit. But you're right. I've been very reliant upon technology to go to some of the places that I've been to. But I think if you study, if you prepare, you train hard, you typically have a plan B or plan C if things start to fail around you.
Mm-hmm. And then, moving from your early days, you started studying at Stanford initially. So that must have been pretty amazing to have to settle for a period of time in a specific location.
Well, that's the longest place I had spent anywhere in my life. I spent all told about 10 years in undergraduate and medical school in the Bay Area, which of course is a paradise. It's we called Stanford the farm, and it's just this sprawling, beautiful campus in the foothills of the San Francisco Bay Area, and just loved it there. Couldn't afford to live there now. I mean, it's just such a crazy place, but it was a great place to learn, and then it opened up, of course, a lot of doors for me later in life. I then went on to my post-medical school training in Boston and then in Colorado, which were wonderful places as well.
At what point did you decide that you wanted to be an astronaut?
Probably since I was 5 years old, since I could walk and talk, I had the ambition to fly in space. My father worked on the Apollo program, actually, when I was very young, so I had a front row seat to those amazing, epic voyages. I had model rockets and posters on the wall, and even saw the launch of Apollo 9 from Cocoa Beach in Florida. And I remember it, rumbling in my chest, and watching this rocket ship with 3 men aboard going up into space, and thought, my gosh, maybe I could do that one day. And I actually had the ambition to set the first footprints down on Mars. It didn't quite work out that way for my career, unfortunately, but I certainly believe that the work that we did in my career will help, enable future Mars explorers. And so I'm I'm excited about that. And I really believe that the very first Martians have been born. They're walking the surface of the planet. They're in their education someplace. I don't know if they're in kindergarten or if they're postdocs, but they are with us, walking among us, and in, I don't know if it's 15, 20, 30 years from now, we'll see human explorers on Mars, and I think that's really exciting. I can't wait to see it.
Where did the medical degree fit into your life plans to go to space?
Well, so my grandfather was an ophthalmologist. He was an eye surgeon. I never met him, actually. He passed before I was born. But I think hearing of what he did in his career, and my grandmother was his nurse. They worked together. So I had a medicine in my family, and the ability to help other people through, my work was really, really exciting. And the research that I could do as part of medical science was very important. So when the shuttle program started in the late 70s, they hired a very large group of astronauts, including a number of positions. And I saw then a pathway to pursue both of my loves, which would be to fly in space, but also to become a healer. And so I realized I could do both.
Did you ever feel applying for the astronaut candidacy that you might not get in?
I was convinced I wouldn't get in, actually. When I first applied, I thought, well, I'm still in my residency training. Typically, it can take 2, 3, 4 application cycles to be accepted. So I went in actually very, very relaxed. And in fact, I went in with the mindset, let's just go down to Houston, have fun, hopefully pass the medical exam, meet the people, and then maybe the next time or the next time after that, I would get selected. And so I think because I was so relaxed and I was convinced that I was not going to be selected, I did really well. And so I was just myself. And that's the advice that I give all prospective astronaut candidates. If you get an interview, they just want to see, talking about the interview panel, if you're the type of person that they'd like to spend 6 months in a can with. That's really what it comes down to. If you've made the interview, you're qualified, you'd be a very wonderful astronaut. However, it all comes down to being a team member and the interpersonal kind of soft touch kinds of attributes. And so I was very, very fortunate to be selected my first time around. And I really looked like I was 12 when I was first selected as well. So I figured they weren't going to take me that seriously either. And lo and behold, when I was first began training, my classmates ended up giving me a call sign. It's an aviation tradition where they find an attribute that you're kind of sensitive about, and then they kind of rib you about it. So through your call sign. So I became Doogie, short for Doogie Howser, MD. I don't know if you recall the TV show, but it's this precocious kid who's a physician, and so I really hated that name because I was convinced that the chief of astronaut office wouldn't take me seriously as someone to assign to a flight. But everything worked out quite well for me. I have no complaints.
And then going from there to your first mission assignment, what was that like?
Well, your first time in the barrel, it's just extraordinary. But there's so many unknowns. Even though you'd been training for, I was in training, I guess, for a little over a year when I was selected for my first flight. So I knew the shuttle systems and kind of the basics of a generic space shuttle mission. But then you began training in earnest for your mission. And STS-66, my first flight, was dedicated to studying the Earth's ozone layer in our upper atmosphere. So we had a bunch of very sensitive instruments and a satellite in our payload bay that we'd be taking up, and other life science and other types of experiments on board. But became very, very focused on that particular mission, and then the training in earnest, really begins. Okay, so we're going to strap on a rocket. We're going to feel real G's. So you train in a centrifuge, and you train the actual contingency spacewalks that you might have to perform. And So it gets really very, very exciting. But until you actually have been there that first time, you really don't know what it's like. There's no way to kind of anticipate all the nuances of it, and you don't know how you're going to feel. And so that was a big step. Once I got in space the first time, and I realized that, hey, I'm going to do well up here. I'll be able to connect all the science and the operations I need to up here. Then you can start to relax a little bit, and then really kind of absorb the enormity of the experience that you're having. Looking out the window at a full continent in a single glance, to see orbital sunrises and sunsets every 45 minutes. It's just, you can't get that in a simulation or in an IMAX movie. There's no way to anticipate what that's going to do to your psyche.
Well, you must have spoken to a lot of other astronauts before you made it to space yourself, and they must have described in detail what everything was like. Did you ever want them not to tell you so much?
Words are powerful, but they, as we say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, to actually see it with your own eyes is infinitely more powerful than that. So I don't think there's a person alive eloquent enough to really do the experience justice. And that's why I'm so excited about the near future with companies like SpaceX and Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin that'll be taking many, many more people up into at least low Earth orbit space or suborbital space to give people that perspective will change people forever. It's such a powerful thing, and there really isn't a way to anticipate how it's going to directly affect you. You can see beautiful 3D IMAX imagery, and it is really beautiful, of course, but it's infinitely more powerful when you see it through your own eyes.
Do you feel that this experience changed you as a person in some way?
Absolutely. I think it's impossible to go into space and not come back somehow changed. It's a profound, individual life experience for me. I came back certainly much more aware of the fragility of our planet. I think everyone comes back at a minimum an environmentalist to some degree. Perhaps not a tree-hugging, Birkenstock-wearing, environmentalist, but you really see the fragility of our planet, the human scars on our planet. Nature and planet Earth are incredible from that perspective. That humanity, unfortunately, is the sole source of the scars. So that the cities look gray. Typically, you can see jet contrails across the skies, bilge dumping in the oceans, deforestation in rainforests, things of that nature. So you really do appreciate the magnitude of humanity's impact on the planet, and you can also see just the very thin atmosphere that differentiates us from the vacuum of space. It's paper thin, and so that I think changes everyone when they get the chance.
Scott, there's a lot of Apollo astronauts who've had these profound spiritual experiences, and when they came back, they when they went up, perhaps they weren't looking at the world in a spiritual way, but then they came back and they're like, wow, there is a God out there. Did you have a similar experience?
I would have loved to have had one of those experiences that Edgar Mitchell is the kind of the most significant example of what you just described there. It would have been wonderful to have had that sort of epiphany, if you will. I can't say that happened to me, but it certainly makes me appreciate the gift of life, and has changed my life in many, many wonderful ways. And I think certainly makes me appreciate every day on this planet and the gift of my family and the other wonderful opportunities in my life. But in terms of having a a religious kind of moment in space, that unfortunately didn't happen for me.
And how about being outside in a spacesuit compared to the first time you went into space and observing the Earth from inside a spacecraft?
Right. So the first time out of that hatch on a spacewalk is just unbelievably extraordinary. It's the most wonderful astronaut experience there possibly can be. To be outside in your own personal spaceship. Essentially, you're building a spaceship around the astronaut in a spacesuit. Everything that you need to sustain life, to support life in a spacecraft or a space station needs to be put around the spacewalking astronaut. You need oxygen delivery, you need carbon dioxide removal, you need electrical power, you need radios, you need a cooling system, you need lights and cameras and tools, a jet backpack to fly yourself back to safety. So really, you're in your own personal, hot rod spaceship when you're outside on a spacewalk, and you have just this dome visor between you and the enormity of the universe. It's not limited to just a porthole window that you can see just a small portion of the sky. You can see everything. You can turn around and you can see, to the beginnings of time, looking out into the blackness of space. And so that's really a profound experience, and a little overwhelming for me. On my very first spacewalk, I'd floated out of the hatch, and within the first 15 minutes, we had an emergency that could have scuttled the whole spacewalk. My safety tether reel, which is kind of like a steel braid cable that's on a retraction reel, failed, and so it was no longer pulling back into the housing of this safety tether enclosure. And so I tried to cycle the unlock mechanism. I tried to pull out a little bit more and then force it back in. Nothing was working, and so there was a concern that I might have to scuttle the spacewalk within the first few minutes. But we ended up defaulting to using a Russian tether protocol, sort of like ice climbing. One tether hook on one handrail, another tether hook on the next one, and then kind of work your way along. And we got approval from Houston to go do that, and we're able to finish the spacewalk. So that was a real wonderful moment when I realized that my lifelong dream of spacewalking wasn't going to be ended in the first moments it started.
Wow.
Huh.
What did space look like when you were outside?
Well, so I really wanted to see the blackness of space, and I wanted to see the Milky Way, and so I asked my crewmates to leave the payload bay lights of the space shuttle off so that my eyes could dark accommodate and really appreciate the intensity of the star field. And it really was amazing. I could see, so crystal clear the Milky Way. And also what's different, of course, is that we're above the Earth's atmosphere, so stars don't twinkle. We know the song "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" because we have an atmosphere that causes those stars to kind of twinkle with the atmospheric distortion. But up there, they're like trillions and trillions of tiny little flashlights. And so I looked up and I could see the star field above, and then I looked over and I could actually see Anatoly Solovyov, one of the space station Mir crew members, their commander, who actually holds the world record for the most number of spacewalks, and he was looking down upon me as I floated out as well, which is really, really pretty cool.
Outstanding. I mean, throughout your astronaut career, I mean, this must have been quite a highlight, but probably also flying with John Glenn.
Yeah, my goodness, to fly with the ultimate hero of your profession. It's, I mean, if you're a physicist, it'd be like, getting to solve problems of the universe with Albert Einstein, or if you're a basketball player, playing with Michael Jordan. For me, to get a chance to fly in space with John Glenn was as good as it gets. Someone I admired from my earliest days, and I never thought I'd really meet him, let alone get to know him as a close friend, and then actually fly in space with him. So that was, certainly a rare, rare honor to be able to rub shoulders with him in the cosmos. The interesting part of it, of course, was that as a physician on board, I was there basically to make sure that he did well, to take care of his health and well-being. So as I joke these days, I can joke about it now, but if something happened to John, I might as well not come back home. It was very important, serious undertaking to make sure that he did well. But of course, at age 77, he was as fit as can be, and he did a magnificent job up in space. He wanted to be every bit a member of the crew. He didn't want to be just a payload specialist, just to be assigned to his medical experiments. He wanted to contribute in every way possible as a full crew member, and he did that. And so, he lived such an incredible, storied American life. We sadly lost him last December at age 95. But in my mind, one of the greatest Americans of our time.
And it's pretty special that he's written a forward or a little recommendation to your book as well. That's
yeah. I feel very lucky to have him part of this. That he read my book and an earlier version of it, of course. But really exciting to, like I say, have had him in my life, and also his amazing wife Annie and the rest of their family.
And you must have also really appreciated seeing John Glenn's experiences returning back into space. Was there something surprising about the way that he was training and his view once he was up there in space, of course, for the second time?
He was an aviator his entire life, and so he had this great, sharp mind. Obviously, he's a phenomenal statesman. He served 4 terms in the United States Senate, so he's very worldly. Had well thought out opinions about everything. He was well informed, and so what he brought to our flight was just this, sharp as a tack mind and a get it done attitude. He was an astronaut his entire life. He just had that great capacity to solve problems, get things done, and so it was amazing to rub shoulders with him. And of course, it had been 37 years of absence. He flew when he was 40 years old as a Mercury astronaut. He came back at age 77, and so to be there on the flight deck when he floated up the first time and saw planet Earth again after that long absence was really a special moment. Really. Something he'd been waiting for clearly for many, many years. I think he was informally told by President Kennedy that he was too much of a national asset to risk flying in space again, and I don't think that ever really sat very well with him.
So Scott, you've been to the Mir Space Station and you've been to the International Space Station. What was it like to see Mir for the first time compared to the first time you saw the ISS?
Well, the Mir Space Station really doesn't look like it should be able to fly. It was this ungainly kind of spider-like contraption, but incredibly ingenious assembly with radial modules and solar panels extending from it. So it was quite a dramatic sight. We arrived after there had been a collision to the space station with a resupply ship called Progress, and so we could actually see divots in one of the radiator panels and actually through holes through one of the solar panels on the Spectre module. So it was an eye-opening experience, to see this former Soviet space station, now an international space station, that we were going to get a chance to visit as American astronauts. It was really a rare treat. The International Space Station was kind of designed to be modular, to really grow through its life. So on my first mission to the ISS on STS-100, it was a fairly tiny space station. There was a very tiny truss called Z1, and we had the U.S. laboratory module and the Russian segment, and a few other things called PMAs that were attached there. But it was a fairly small space station. And then later in my career on STS-120, nearing the end of the space station assembly process, it was enormous, about the size of a football field. And so it was wonderful to get a chance to see the evolution of this, city in the sky, really, that's now, orbiting the Earth 365 days a year with 6 crew members on board doing, world-class science.
And when you were doing your repair in 2007 for STS-120, I guess there was a very important repair that had to be done, and a rather dangerous one.
Yes, so we had a very dynamic, challenging mission to install a new module called Harmony to the International Space Station that was an interconnecting node where European and Japanese modules could plug in. And so that was our first objective on the flight. And then the second was to relocate this P6 solar array truss from the top of the station and put it way out at the very tip, and then unfurl solar panels to allow further expansion of the space station, to allow other nations to fly their laboratory modules. So really a critical part of the assembly of the ISS. And as all this was unfolding, Doug Wheelock, my spacewalking partner, and I had just finished our 3rd spacewalk, and we were floating in the airlock, just elated that things were going so well. This was the 3rd of 5 planned spacewalks on the mission, and we were high-fiving, all, as you might imagine. But as we floated inside the rest of the space station and saw our crewmates, everyone had a really concerned look on their faces, and we couldn't understand why they weren't celebrating with us, and we ended up floating over to the TV monitors, and we could see this rip in what's called the P6 4B solar array at the very tip of the space station, and it came to pass that there was a guide wire that had become frayed, and it had caused this rip to occur, and so at that instant, they were no longer able to further extend the solar panel, nor could they retract it at this point. So we had a limp noodle of a solar panel out there, and either we would have to go out and throw away a $1 billion national asset, or somehow go out and fix it. And so I think it's one of the most triumphant recovery stories in the Space Shuttle Space Station era. Sort of an Apollo 13 effort where brilliant engineers in Houston and in California figured out, well, this is all the stuff that the crew has on board the Space Shuttle and Space Station. What can we build out of this stuff that will allow for repair of the solar panel? And then how can we get someone out to the tip of the space station further than we had ever gone before? Our robotic arm doesn't work. It's not long enough. What can we cobble together to get someone there? And how would we fly someone at the tip of this arm out there within the confines of a single spacewalk? And so many different consecutive miracles had to come together to make this happen, but they did it. And they figured this out within 72 hours, and Doug and I went out on a 4th and final spacewalk for the mission, and with some amazing robotic flying by Stephanie Wilson and Dan Tani inside the shuttle, and Pam Melroy and other crew members overseeing it from inside the station and shuttle, and then a mission control team that was operating things from the ground. It was a Hail Mary play for sure.
But of course, you had to perform the EVA yourself. You had this fantastic crew supporting you, but you were the one responsible for making the final manipulations. What was that like?
Well, as I described it, it was a high pucker factor kind of experience, because everyone had done their job so perfectly up until the final touch labor, which would be Doug and myself. And so I had to cut out the straight guide wire and wheels, we call them, had to safely retract that guide wire back into its housing. And then I had to install 5 cufflinks across the breadth of the solar panel. And so the challenge was that I couldn't have any direct contact with the solar panel because it was fully energized. We couldn't turn this thing off. Even in the shadow of Earth and orbital night, it's still generating a lot of current. And so there was concern that I could be electrocuted, which I was concerned about as well, obviously. So had to be very, very careful in installing these cufflinks across the solar panel. And it was just such a dramatic, exciting day on the job. Certainly my best day on the job ever. And the cool part for me, actually, was the elation of having finished that work and then having a 45-minute long slow trajectory on this 90-foot long robotic boom to get me back to the space station truss so that we could come back inside. And so I had this, global perspective. I saw half of the world pass beneath me on this ride back to the space station, and it was kind of an orbital victory lap, if you will.
And was that your last spacewalk?
That was I definitely ended on a high point. That was my very last career spacewalk. Yes. Wow.
So then, by the time you left NASA, you were 45 or 46 years old. You'd done 5 space flight missions and 7 spacewalks. I mean, where do you go from there?
Well, it's a big world out there. People do ask me not infrequently, what's next, and I find it kind of a curious question because my sense of wonder about our planet is boundless, and so there's so many places that I've yet to go, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same level of adrenaline as a spacewalk, but to go hiking in Colorado with my wife and daughter is a wonderful thing. To of course go challenge myself on other types of expeditions, that's an exciting thing too. So I have taken a couple of trips to Mount Everest and some other really wonderful places too. So there are all manner of exploration. There's personal fulfillment and just for the joy of travel, and I consider that exploration. And then there's pushing the boundaries of science and pushing the boundaries of human performance, which is an added degree of difficulty, if you will, for exploration too. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, but that I see exploration as just this huge scope.
Mm-hmm. Well, so when you're out there, looking at the next adventure, do you try to have some sort of a scientific component associated with it, or is it really to go out there and see something that you've never seen before?
A little of both. I love to go places where I've never been, and I like the physical and personal and intellectual challenge of setting up an expedition and overcoming whatever technical or operational challenges there are. But my main driver, I'd like to advance science if I can. Also, as an inventor, I like to use extreme environments as a catalyst for innovation, and so I've been very successful in both of my seasons on Mount Everest, for example, in developing technologies that have utility up on the mountain. But I'm hoping that also those things will also convert into the commercial marketplace. So I enjoy pushing the boundaries of technology in these extreme environments and then finding a home for those technologies in everyday lives.
Mm-hmm. What do you primarily do these days now that you're no longer an astronaut?
Yeah, so currently I'm a CEO of a tech startup called Fluidity Technologies, and it's based on my intellectual property, a patent of mine that is a robotic control system, and we're we're advancing a whole family of controllers, single-handed controllers for movement through physical and virtual space. So everything from drone flight to computer gaming and virtual and augmented reality, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which would be like surgical robotics. And so it's a very exciting time to be in this field. We're leveraging machine learning as well to make these systems very intelligent and to give you the skills beyond which you could actually fly yourself. And so giving people superhuman performance is what we're all about.
So Scott, if you could give yourself some advice, if you somehow had a magic time machine and you could go back in time and give the 20-something-year-old Scott some advice for anything to do with life, what would it be?
Oh my goodness, that's a killer question. I'm not sure how I would advise myself. I'm certainly happy with the way my life has evolved, but I've had to overcome a number of challenges. You know, the pathway to success is not a linear one, and I think it's important that we fail periodically, and we learn from those failures. And so I've had some health issues. I've had some struggles with just a variety of things throughout my career that have made me a better person, made me a more effective team member and leader. And so I'm not sure I would want to alter the course of my life, given that it ended up getting to some wonderful places along the way. I guess I'm talking around your excellent question, but I think it's important to stumble every once in a while, but also to keep your resolve, know where it is that you really want to go, to be at your core a good person and caring person and a team member, and so yeah, I'm not sure I would have wanted to spill the beans and maybe mess up the trajectory that I've had.
Fantastic. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today, and I very much recommend your book to any of the viewers. I guess we're also giving a number of these books away, and so what I'll do is that I'll leave a link below the video so that anyone who's interested, they can enter the competition and get one of the signed copies from you.
Terrific. Thank you so much for having me on today. Really great to visit with you as always.
Thank you so much, Scott. Bye now. We have 5 signed copies of Scott's book, and one of them could be yours. So follow the link below and enter your email address.